Adi Shankara would begin any of his recitation or any of his writing worshipping his Guru, Govinda Bhagavad Pada. Sarva Vedanta Sara Gocharam, Tam Agocharam, he would say, Govindam Paramanandam. You are the seer, you are the knower of all the Vedanta Sara, all the essence of all the Vedas. You see them all, Drishta. You see them all like a gooseberry on your palm. You see them all. Yet you remain unseen. Tvam agocharam. You remain unseen. O Govinda. Govinda Bhagavad Pada is the Guru's name. Paramanandam, you are the source of ultimate joy. You are always in ultimate joy. I, Pranatosmiham, I salute you. Sri Vivekananda would begin his prayers, his recitations, his talks, praying to his Guru, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. What is Sri Ramakrishna's prayer? You sing in front of Bhajagovindam, you chant. Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarva dharma swarupine avatara varishtaya. This is how he described his Guru. Sthapakaya cha dharmasya. You establish dharma. And sarva dharma swarupine. You are the embodiment of all the dharma. Avatara varishtaya. You are the greatest of the avatars. So Ramakrishna te namaha. I worship you, O Ramakrishna, I salute you. How should I describe the Guru, who is God? In other two cases, Gurus were born man and became gods. In our case, Guru was born God, became man. It's the other way around. So how do we worship him? Is there a description to him? Are there words in the dictionary of all humanity that can describe the glory of a Guru like this, who is actually God but becomes man for the sake of his disciples? In other cases, Guru became God for them. In our case, God became Guru. So how do I describe? Should I say Sarva Vedanta Sara Gocharam? He is the Vedanta Sara. Tvameva Sarva Vedanta Sara. You alone are the Vedanta Sara. You are only all the Dharma. You are Dharma Sarva Dharma Swarupine. Should I call you an avatar at all? Because you were, you are, you will be. You don't come and go. Others can come and go. So can I even classify you as an avatar is the question, who are always there. Parabrahma Swarupine Satyasayine Namaha. You are Sarva Vedanta Sarantvam. You are the essence of all the Vedanta Sara. Vedantas are the Sara of all the Vedas. You are the Sara of the Vedanta, the essence, the ultimate. Sarvam Brahmamayam. You are the ultimate. You are the representative. Parabrahma Swarupine you are. You are not less than that. I can't even classify you as an avatar because you don't come and go. You are always. You were, you are, and you will be. So you are that kind of a Guru to us. That is how we, the Sishyas of our Guru, should chant. Isn't it? Look at the fortune. You believe it or not, I clearly perceive on my right side Adi Shankaracharya, or on my left side Swami Vivekananda. Both are looking at this audience and saying that the work that began with Adi Shankara and continued by Vivekananda must culminate in Satya Sai, his disciples. He started his gurus with Govinda Bhagavad Pada. He was very, very troubled in those times because his guru Gaudapada had given him a task to Govinda Bhagavad Pada of spreading the Advaita Vedanta to everybody. Unfortunately, the times were such, Mudhatvam, the foolishness and the ritualistic, orthodox ways of religion were destroying the culture of India. The Sanatan Dharma was getting forgotten. A small group of people, this Gaudapada, who was already very old, He had given the work to Bhagavad Pada, Govinda Bhagavad Pada, to simplify the scriptures, to present it in that day's language to everyone, send his disciples all around the country to spread the idea of Advaita. But unfortunately, he also, for the want of the fittest disciple, grew old without being able to achieve much. That's when God himself decided, let me send one person to this Govinda Bhagavad Pada. Poor man is praying every day that what my guru started, I am not able to complete it. Because I am for the want of a right disciple. Please send me someone. He kept on praying. That is how Shankaracharya was born. He was not born because whatever Aryamba or Shiva Guru prayed for a child to Shiva and Shiva appeared in their dream and said, I am giving you a child. That is the nimitta. Parents were only the nimitta, instruments to bring Shankaracharya. But who was the reason? His guru. Who was the guru? Govinda Bhagavad Pada, who was even in turn very sad that he could not do what his guru wanted, Gaudapada. So he was suffering within himself and kept on praying to that Lord, please do something about this. I am not able to do what my guru has asked me to do. That is how Shankaracharya was born, because of his guru's prayers. And then, you know the story, I will not go into the details how he made finally. He became a sannyasi at a young age, took mother's permission after his father's demise, and then walked all the way up to Narmada, where he met his guru, Govinda Bhagavad Pada. And the very first question, who are you? And his answer is, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. Sixer, first ball. Guru said, I have got my disciple. Nobody has given me an answer as strong, as firm as this, with this conviction, as this young boy. None of the disciples. He had a couple of people who were writing and transcribing. That time there's no printing presses. There people have to write and rewrite. And if you want to spread this and reach it out to more people, what you have to do? You have to rewrite it, entire thing. Your hand was the printing machine. And so they were just simply writing and rewriting, but nobody had the courage to comment on the scriptures. Nobody had that kind of a maturity to write commentary on them, to explain it to the common man, from that difficult Sanskrit language to a common man's understanding. There was nobody who had that capability. Shankaracharya had that. So when he joined his guru, Govinda Bhagavad Pada, at the Narmada Ashram, he created history. He brought all those scriptures which were dying down back to life and made sure that it reached all the corners. He just didn't write and keep quiet. Just write commentary and keep quiet. He walked length and breadth of the country and did what? Spread this Advaita Vedanta Siddhantas, which his guru wanted, which guru's guru wanted. So he did that. And he didn't mind, oh, how far I have to go? Is there a hotel room? Is there some car facility? Somebody will pick me, drop me? What about my dinner and lunch? No worries. Simply walked. His guru told, you have to establish Vedanta Siddhanta. He said, what is the way? He said, you have to go and defeat the biggest jnani or whatever, Vidwan in India right now. That is the only way that time it could be done. You defeat the highest, most renowned Vidwan in the country, and you can become the next bigger Vidwan, and your philosophy will become most important. So he said, who is that person? He went searching. They said, there is one. Kumarila Bhatt, his name is Bhatta. He is the guru, and he has a disciple by name Mandana Mishra. And these people are staunch promoters of Mimamsa, Purva Mimamsa, that is Karma Kandas, ritualistic, because that time the ritualistic had become too much. They were not believing in this idea of Sarvam Brahmam and all that stuff. They said you have to perform rituals, through that you attain punyam, through those punyam you attain heaven's great, get all your blessings and fulfillment. So that still, though they call it Vidya, it was still Vidya Maya. There is an Avidya Maya that I don't know anything. A Vidya Maya that I know everything is also Maya. Ultimately, once you become what it is, then only you are true jnani. So they were all busy with this Karma Kandas, and because they were the most important people, Magadha, the kingdom, was very powerful kingdom that time. And so anything that goes out from there was listened to by everybody else. And the biggest scholar of that kingdom was this Mandana Mishra, in its capital. So this Mandana Mishra has to be defeated in debate. So when this man went to Kumbhmela, but he was already immolating himself in fire. That was some kind of a ritualistic purification. It seems you burn the body, you get rid of your sins. I don't know what. But this Kumbhmela Bhatt was doing something. He said, please don't die, I have to defeat you. First let us debate so that I can establish Vedanta. He said, whatever your intentions are, I have decided to go through this ritual of self-immolation. The only person left now is my disciple, Mandana Mishra. Go to Mandana Mishra and argue with him, debate with him, and win over. You win the debate and you become the greatest and you can establish Vedanta. He didn't stop there. He walked all the way up to meet Mandana Mishra. This Mandana Mishra was one arrogant fellow. See, the more you know, the more arrogance comes. That's why Gopikas are better, I say, any day. Any day Gopikas are better. They didn't know anything, it's all right. Because they were pure-hearted. The moment you know, you become, the ahankara, mamakara horns start growing. So Mandana Mishra was not an easy man at all. First of all, some people are there. If you watch some of the debates, you will know how these debaters are. Some logic they'll come up with, no head or tail to that logic. But he was like that. Nobody would dare to challenge him. And he had such high power and position that some boy, half naked, without the look and feel of the great Vidwan, he doesn't have whatever the paraphernalia, whatever the costumes, and no name. Nobody in the world, nobody knows him. He goes and says, I want to challenge you. And of course that went on and Mandana Mishra accepted the challenge more out of, I think, hasyam, to humor him, that's it. But look at this young Shankaracharya. He defeated this Mandana Mishra. Over 8 days he debated continuously. And then not only Mandana Mishra, he debated his wife Ubaya Bharati also in the debate. Ubaya Bharati made it even complicated because she started asking rahasyas of Grahastha Ashrama, which he did not know much about. Poor man, he didn't marry. When his mother was wanting to get him married, that time marriages were happening early age, 8-9 years, were married off. Mother was insisting that we should get married. What did he do? He jumped into that river, Purna, and that river also has a story. He prayed to the river to pass by his home because mother was finding it difficult to go for bath that longer distance. So we went to Kaladi, we saw the mother river Purna. We touched the river. On its bank we celebrated a small satsang 2 years ago. I remembered how Adi Shankara would have prayed to Purna, you are flowing from that side, my mother finds it difficult to go, please flow this way. And you will see that before Kaladi, the river splits, creating a small island in between. And one of its branches flows close to the Kaladi. And that is how Shankaracharya brought the river. So he jumped in that river and told, a crocodile has caught hold of me, ma. Mother says, what do I do? He said, if you give me sannyasa, only then this crocodile will leave me. Mother was mother. Anything for you, anything to see you alive. All right, if sannyasa helps you survive, I grant you the permission to be a sannyasi. Immediately came out saying, the crocodile left me. Like the crocodile catching hold of your leg in its territory where you can't defeat it. If you get into the samsara and think you will defeat samsara, not possible. Many people take great courage saying that I will face the world. Swami says, world, God, both should be balanced. Let me go and face. You think it's so easy to get out of the grip? Unduly don't take the risks of it. Unless Swami says, no, you go get married because that is good for you. Your prarabdha is there, your samskaras are there, vasanas are there. That is what is good for you. Otherwise, you think you get into the water and you can beat the crocodile in its own territory. Not possible. So stay away. So he said, I wanted to cut out of this samsara. Mother permitted. So he didn't know anything about Grihasthashra dharmas, which is very important because we never looked at Grihasthashra dharmas as anything lower or something that has to be, looked down upon, or something as a sannyasi you should abhor. No. You are born out of the same Grihasthashrama dharma. How can you call it anything lesser than divine? As long as the dharma is being followed in Grihasthashrama, that's all. So Shankaracharya had no such things about it. Many people, sannyasis, they look down upon the Grihasthis as if they are ignorant, drowned in the worldly vices, and that is their bad, wrong outlook. They are not true sannyasis. But how can they think of it in this way, which has given them the very birth, human birth, manushyattvam, which is allowing them to go towards mokshatvam. So that is not Shankara's idea, that he did not look down upon his samsara as the lower way of life. He just said that I want to pursue sannyasa. That is my inner calling. So mother permitted. So now Ubay Bharati challenged him in all kinds of complicated questions and he had no answers. So he prayed to Ubay Bharati, please give me some time. I'll get back to you. And they say he did Parakaya Pravesha into a dying king. And he had three wives, but one of the very devout wives. He told her secretly that I am not your husband king, but I am the Shankaracharya who has entered this body. I have come here to make you my guru and to learn from you all the secrets of Grihastha Dharma, how a wife should behave, husband should behave, what are the various duties, obligations, and goes on. So she explained everything and finally he blessed her with moksha before leaving. And then came back to Ubay Bharati, debated and defeated her. Ubay Bharati and Mandana Mishra were the foremost disciples of Shankaracharya, whom he defeated in a debate. And that's how Purva Mimamsa came to an end. And Uttara Mimamsa, what is Vedanta, is called out of the 6 philosophical ways. See, Vedanta became the supreme. If not for Shankaracharya, who had taken the courage, look at the courage of a young boy. Look at the courage. He has nowhere with us, nothing. Doesn't even know he'll find Mandana Mishra or not. Doesn't even know Mandana Mishra will entertain him. After all, who is nothing. He's been sponsored by the king. King is his benefactor. Who is Shankaracharya? Look at the courage. I want to fulfill my guru's wish. That's all is the mission of my life. Look at the courage of Adi Shankara. I look at his faith in his guru. I shall do what my guru wants. I will not let him die in remorse that he could not establish what his guru wanted. Look, the Guru Parampara. I shall do it. And he went with the courage, defeated, became the thing. And of course, he became Sureshwara. Mandana Mishra was renamed. Sannyasa name was Sureshwara. Ubay Bharati left her body soon after. And she told, I am Saraswati incarnate and wherever you want, I will come and establish myself. That's why in Sringeri, when he saw, they say a snake was protecting a frog. So he felt that this is a divine sign. Let me establish the Mata there. And that's how Sringeri Mata came. We all went to Sringeri Mata and enjoyed the Mata and Darshana also there of Mother Sharada. So Sringeri Mata was established and Sureshwara was made the Matadisha. He established him. See, now this Guru is teaching his disciples to go and establish these Vedanta temples. Because people cannot come to one center. Why did Shankaracharya go and establish in 4 corners? Because he knew knowledge has to go to people. People won't come to knowledge anymore. That is the Prabhava right now. Knowledge and the knowledgeable have to go to the doorsteps of people and teach them. That is the only way to revive it. He didn't mind traveling across the length and breadth walking. Puri Jagannath, they follow the Rig Veda. So basically 4 matas were like 4 Vedas for him and 4 disciples to represent each of these Vedas. So Puri Jagannath came to Sharada, Sringeri established. Then he went to Dwaraka, there he established one more. And then he went at Joshi Mat, Jyotir Mat they call it. I saw that also. That also was established by Adi Shankara. And all 4 disciples, his 4 disciples were there. Sureshwara I just mentioned. There was a Hastamalaka. Hastamalaka was born Vijnani. Jnani he was. His father was not sure what he is like. But they thought he is an idiot, he is a total dumb. But when Shankaracharya saw him near Kollur, where our Mookambika is there, he saw this boy and said he is a Jnani. He asked him, who are you? And the answer that Shankaracharya had given to Govind Bhagavad Pada, this boy gave it to Shankaracharya. And immediately Shankaracharya knew this boy is a Jnani. He told his father his ways are different for his age because he's a Jnani, he's not ordinary. Give him to me. And that's why his name is Hastamalaka. Hastamalaka means gooseberry in the palm. Hasta Amalaka means somebody who can see the Jnana as the gooseberry in the palm. That is the Vedantic example they give for a Jnani. For him, Jnana is as obvious and visible as the gooseberry Amala on one's palm. That's why Hastamalaka or Karamalaka is also called. Like that he found Padmapada. His faith in Guru, you see. See why I am talking about Guru Shishya Parampara more than that. I will come to the conclusion soon. Padmapada. Padmapada had such faith in his Guru He told, come over to me. And other disciples were thinking less of this Padmapada because he needed several time explanation. Adi Shankara will explain once, he won't understand, twice, he won't understand, three times he'll make him explain and explain and explain. So others, when some brilliant students in the class, they get agitated when some so-called dumb fellow is asking too many times. So they were getting agitated. Shankaracharya thought, let me teach what is the importance of this disciple. And he told, come over. And he had such faith in his Guru, he just walked on the water. And flowers blossomed. Every step he put on water, a lotus bloomed like steps. And he walked over and came without even thinking he's walking on water. Look at his faith. That he brought him and he established him in the Dwaraka ashrama. And then one more is there. He is the dumber than the dumbest disciple. But mukam karoti vachalam, as I say always, with kripa. Any grace falls on you, anything becomes. This Totakacharya was great. He always will serve Shankaracharya. Not even for a moment he will deviate. He won't learn much, but he will not understand also much philosophy. But all the time he is serving Shankaracharya. So once it so happened that he was waiting at Sringeri for his to start the class, but this boy was missing. And he waited and waited and waited, and all these other people were getting agitated. First of all, he's a dumb. They even commented that he's like talking to the wall, teaching that Totaka is like talking to the wall. So his name was not Totaka, his name was Giri. So he waited for him to come because he was washing Shankaracharya's clothes in the river. That's why he didn't come to the class still. So he waited for him. When he came, he understood these disciples are thinking less of him. So he blessed him in such a way that immediately burst into a poem on Adi Shankaracharya himself in a meter called Totaka. It's called Totaka Ashtam. And that is why his name became Totakacharya. Look at Guru Kripa. The moment Guru's grace falls on you, you become a jnani. You have no other. With complete surrender and faith, he served his Guru. That's all he did. He didn't know what was going on in the class. So each of his disciples is of different kind. Mandana Mishra, extremely intelligent. Isn't it? Hastamalaka is born jnani. He doesn't need to be taught anything. He already knows everything by experience. Look at this Totakacharya. He doesn't know anything, doesn't want to know anything also. But he gets to know everything because of the Guru's grace. And look at the Padmapada, who has so much faith in Guru that he will do anything for Guru's sake. This Guru Shishya Parampara is the most important lifeline of our Indian culture. This is what has kept the culture alive. The Guru gave the job to the Shishya. Shishya took the job up and did what he wanted to do. And then he passed it on to the next generation and the next generation. And this Guru Shishya Parampara has kept our traditions alive. And they did it at any cost. When he told these four of them, they don't belong to these four places. But he told you all have to go to these four corners and promote and propagate Advaita. They went and established. Now, ashram was not like ashram that we are establishing. A nice big area with big infrastructure. Nothing. Ashram means he will show the spot, go there and sit down. And that is all your ashram is. So I went to Joshi Math, I saw the cave of Adi Shankaracharya. He came alive from the statue. Because they are all there in Sukma. He came alive, so happy to see. And that time it also he told. The work that had begun by him and his gurus will be continued by this guru, he said. Satya Sai and his disciples. Anyway, that apart. So this is how his guru taught him to do what was to be done. And even at 32 years, if he can do this all by himself, by going everywhere and doing whatever was required, it's because his tremendous faith in his guru and his extreme loyalty to his guru's wish. For that, he was ready to give up anything. Many people see Shankaracharya's life in many different ways. How do we see? We should see his dedication to his guru and his guru's wish. That is one more lesson that you must derive from Adi Shankaracharya's life. At the end, as he said, he went and merged himself because he was always aware of who he is. For them, leaving the body is not some big occasion. So he just walked up in Kedarnath, he gave up his body, and that is then nobody saw him thereafter. He lived 32 years physically, but subtly continues to live, continues to guide, continues to thrive. Now, fast forward 1,000 years, again decline started. Ramanujacharya, I should not miss him in between, he may feel bad. Then Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, they are the Dvaita and Vishishta Dvaita Siddhantas, but both had studied Advaita. Both Madhvacharya and Ramanujacharya had studied Advaita under different gurus, but finally they found more of relief or more of their liking, inclination towards Dvaita and Vishishta Dvaita. Great contribution by them to develop that also, because we were all being attacked by different foreign forces who were, first thing they were doing is destroying our religion and culture, because that is the backbone of Indian society. Everybody had understood. Somebody asked, what is this? So much of spirituality is there in India, yet India is like this. The country is so backward, it is not progressed, though it has such great thoughts. I told the very fact that this country is still alive, that is thanks to this Advaita. Forget whether it is progressed or not. This kind of a diverse country with so many diverse cultures, religions, thoughts. And that is the kind of work that these great people have done, be it Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, or even in other ways, Mirabai, who brought the Bhakti movement, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Whichever way, here our Allama Prabhu or Basavanna, Akka Mahadevi, all these people have brought this idea of God to common man. Alvars, Nayanars, Andal. They did this great work for India. So Shankaracharya brought the first thought of Advaita. So that is the kind of work Shankaracharya has done. And we must remember him this day, because had he not been born on this day, for this day, we may not have been the country that we are today. We might have broken, fragmented into several countries, because this nation would not have been there if this Shankaracharya was not born. We wouldn't have been what we are today. So thanks to him, his gurus, who made him what he was and then what he did. And he passed on this legacy to his disciples, 4 of them to begin with, but then it spread. Now there are so many, they have gone to outside the country, they do many of the things. So he had revitalized the Vedas, Vedanta Siddhanta, and taught us this. 1,000 years later, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who was a Vedantin, who was an Advaita Vedantin, though he followed all the rituals, worships, he lived as a devotee of different religions also. He lived as a Christian, as a Muslim. He followed all the things to find out which is the best, You taste everything and see what is that which you finally want to eat. Your big feast is there. You can eat any of these things. But you taste a little bit first, sampling, and then you find out that, this is what I would like to eat. So that is how he came to Advaita, and he loved it so much and he followed it. And he also had the same desire. See, Vivekananda by himself did not go out and do this. It was Sri Ramakrishna's persistence, insistence, and a little bit of pestering also, I would say. Because even after he left the body, he didn't leave Vivekananda. Vivekananda was in 2 minds to go to America. No sponsorship, no money. He traveled in the, third class compartments of the ship, which will be right at the bottom, where all the workers, cleaners, cooks, laborers will stay. Somebody sponsored only that much ticket. Look at the Maya of the rich. They think he's a sannyasi, he deserves the 3rd class ticket, that's it. 1st class and all for us. Look at their thinking. Even the king who sponsored, he sponsored him only a 3rd class ticket. He didn't mind. He said, so he was in Bombay and he was thinking whether I should go or not, what to do. Sri Ramakrishna appeared right in front of him and said that nothing doing. Go. And he was stunned because that he saw his master live. He said, come over, don't think twice. And in that spate of Guru Bhakti, as if driven, as if intoxicated, as if influenced, he just walked into the ship and got into the 3rd class compartment. And then throughout the journey, he kept on regretting, what have I got into? Because food was not of his taste. There was no vegetarian food. Leftovers were given to these 3rd class people. He didn't know who has eaten before him that food. That kind of, he was fast, but it will take months to reach America. And whatever little bundle he had, that also got stolen because some thief had stolen. So when he actually got down in America, he did not have anything other than what he was wearing on his body. But see how God has done. He sent somebody and they carried him off to their homes, and from there he went to give the speech, and that became a history. and we just celebrated a few days before. But he did on his Guru's behest. And he was very clear Vedantic. He was very clear. Vedanta is the way. There is no other way. No salvation to mankind other than in Vedantic way. He was very clear. And he brought this idea of Vedanta to the West. Shankaracharya walked across the country. He didn't cross the borders of the country. Vivekananda went to the other end of the world. Isn't it? America. And he went only there. He couldn't go further. He did what he wanted to do there, and with his passage of time, his health, he had to return back to India. And he also died young, I think 39 or something, he also passed away. And when he came back to India, his work was still unfinished. And he died in a kind of a little regret, saying that I couldn't do exactly what my Guru wanted. I couldn't reach to the whole world. But his brother disciples and now Ramakrishna Mission, they are putting much effort, and it's credit to them, because they made it international. Swami Shankaracharya made it Indian. Because first India has to live the thought before it goes and preaches others. So Shankaracharya did the first leg of work, followed by Swami Vivekananda, who did the second leg of work of, now that it is established in India, let me take this to the shores of the West. And he went to West and came back. He didn't travel to all parts of the world. He didn't go to Fiji, he didn't go to Australia, so he went a few places and that's about it. And he came back and left whatever happened. Now you see the third phase of Sanatana Dharma in the background of the first two phases. Isn't it? Think now. How Swami is taking this idea of Vedanta, not just going across the country, not just going to one continent or two. He went to every single continent wherever there is a human race. He visited every single continent to teach this greatest principle of Advaita Vedanta. And again he needs a disciple, because these gurus don't do this work themselves. That is the parampara. They need a fit disciple to do the work, to carry forward this mission. So, Gaudapada had one disciple, Govindapada. Govindapada had one disciple, real disciple. They had plenty of unreal disciples. But real disciple was one Shankaracharya to them. This Shankaracharya has 4 real disciples who established themselves, gave up whatever they were doing and did what they wanted to do, because there are 4 directions he wanted to establish. Ramakrishna had 16 of them, which he spread. Vivekananda being the first and foremost, he was important because he took this mission abroad, when his own brother disciples couldn't believe that he is doing this, because crossing 7 seas was considered as a sin, some kind of orthodox thinking that was. But he went and did whatever. Then after that, his brother disciples also, now Ramakrishna Mission is there in every country of the world almost. So that's how they spread. Now Swami's thing is that. Now Swami's mission at this point of time is purely Advaitic mission. Other things will happen. Ashrams or schools or hospitals, these are all secondary. These have to happen because those who are struggling to make a living and eat food, they should get food first, clothes first, a shelter, some education, some health. Then only they can think of higher things. So it's for them, these other service activities. And also for them who need to engage themselves in them to make themselves purer. So it's for them. Because without purity of mind, you cannot realize divinity. Adi Shankara again. He says, Yajantu devata bhajantu devanam. You do as many bhajans you do to devas, you do as many yajnas. Kurvantu karmani, do as many karma as you want. Atmaikyena bina bimukti na labhyate brahma shatantarepi, he says. Without realizing yourself, you will not get moksha, even in 100 years of Brahma. 1 year of Brahma itself is yugas, 4 yugas have to go through to get 1 day of Brahma. 1 year of Brahma, how many yugas? Then 100 years of Brahma also you will not realize. You do as many worships you want, do as many yajnas, homas, avanas, whatever you want, till you realize you are one with the divine, no mukti for you. Viveka Chudamani, Adi Shankara. So clear. So don't waste your time in doing things which don't lead you to this ultimate realization. That is a waste, sheer waste of time. I don't even call it helpful, I call it waste. But I am very clear, I am convinced. I am as convinced as Vivekananda, Shankaracharya, and little more. Because I have heard them, I have heard him, and now I heard my master, so I know very clearly that this is what it is. Na anyah panthayana, there is no other way, this is the only way. So whatever we do is only to make sure that we become a little purer than what we were yesterday. Our chitta shuddhi happens. Mala, vikshepa, avarana, Shankaracharya explains. These are the three faults because of which we cannot see ourselves. Mala, dirt. Vikshepa, distortions. Avarana, a veil, cover. Like a mirror. If you want to see your face, it should be clean of the dust. It should not be distorted. Otherwise, you will see there are some, you see some of these in melas, they put these laughing mirrors. You go and see, you look like somebody else. Fat, small, young. Not that kind of distortions. Third, avarana, should not be covered. What is mala? All our impurities are mala. Our selfishness, greed, anger, lust, all kinds of negativity is mala. How do we get rid of this? Born out of ahankara. So karma yoga for mala. Karma yoga means do selfless work. That will remove your wrong thinking. That is what Vivekananda says. So what is our, to remove this mala from us and make us nirmala, we have to do service, selfless service. So that we'll think less about ourselves, we think about others more, and we become more and more selfless. So our all mala will be washed away. First step over, vikshepa. What is not, it looks like that. Like the classic example is rope looks like a serpent in the dark. So how do we remove that vikshepa? Bhakti yoga. Everything is you, everything is Krishna. I am thinking like that. Ask divine grace. Give me the grace, give me the purity to see you in all, to see all in you. So you do bhakti, all that activity of selflessness, do with bhakti. That will remove this vikshepa from you. And then avarana is jnana. Ultimately you must realize who you are, and this curtain will be parted and you can see your true self. So karma, bhakti, jnana, these all great, they were Advaitik or Dvaitik or Vishishta Advaitik, does not matter. They all followed all the three. Karma, bhakti, jnana. They work day and night. Kuru punya mahoratram. Day and night they work. At the same time, smaranitya manityatam. Always thinking of what is real, what is unreal. Viveka, vairagya. This is the simplest, surest path Swami has shown. All. Do service selflessly, all your impurities will disappear. Think of me all the time. Think of me, remember me all the time. All the vikshepa will disappear. You will not think rope is a snake and get scared. You'll see me in everyone. You'll see everybody as me. So where is somebody who is a stranger to you? Where is the question of getting afraid of anyone? If God alone resides in everyone. Where is the fear? Where is the snake? Everybody is God. Where is the snake? At least belief like that will help us not get afraid of it. And finally, by continuously purifying our mind, the Jnanodaya will happen. The curtain, the veil of Maya will fall on its own. It will shred into pieces. And it will reveal the true self. That's all is spirituality. That's all is Vedanta. That's all is the essence of all that has ever been said, done by any of these great masters, avatars, disciples. This is all it is. Purify yourselves through selfless work. Remember God all the time. Love God from bottom of your heart. See Him in everyone. Think of Him in everyone. And ultimately, by Guru's grace, by God's grace, that jnana will come to you naturally. Like a ripe fruit falls from the tree all of a sudden. Without any effort from anyone. Like that, the jnana will fall into your hand like a berry. And that is how you all will be hastamalaka. You will know the jnana like this. And with that jnana, what do? You continue. As he said, you can continue to cut the wood, continue to draw water. There is no change in that. Change is only the attitude. See, so practical is this Vedanta. If I get into the other Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, you will see how confusing they are. Thank God Shankaracharya came. Otherwise, there would have been 5 more philosophies and everybody will be breaking their heads on each of them. And we wouldn't know what was what. But Vedanta comes and explains all of them, with their limitedness. It explains, you're right, but with limited, you're right. Vedanta is completion of all the things. Like what you call subsets and a universal set. So Vedanta is the universal set, like the space that encompasses everything in it. Like a syllabus that encompasses physics, chemistry, maths, everything in it. Its complete syllabus is Vedanta. So we have to put efforts to learn about it. That is our spiritual heritage, which has been protected by the sacrifices of so many such great beings who came on this earth out of compassion. By so many gurus who inspired their disciples to walk this path. That is our effort. That should be our effort. And what he's saying, that Swami's idea is that not in one, two, or dozen, in hundreds he wants to send such people around the world. But what use is second-hand knowledge? If you're only going to read from Pustaka and get into your Mastaka, and from Mastaka to another's Mastaka and back to another Pustaka, if that is all that is going to be achieved, then what is the use of doing all these things? Anybody who goes to preach Vedanta, as he said, must live Vedanta, must practice Vedanta. If they don't practice, there is no right, no authority for them to speak. Even if they speak, it is like listening to a tape recorder. It is not going to create inspiration. It's not going to create any transformation. It may excite the mind, entertain them, that's about it at the best, and keep them informed. But it's like seeing the picture of a fruit. You don't get to eat it. What use is that kind of knowledge? That is why it is the need of the hour. When we started the Satya Sai University, everybody thought of it in a different ways. Somebody thought it will become better than IISc. Somebody thought it will compete with Harvard. Somebody thought some IIT. Even somebody compared it with the previous university. But none of their thinking is true. They're like blind men trying to know what the elephant is like. That's all their effort was. The true effort is one sentence I described: man into God, human to divine. That's the essence of this university. So all those who are a part of the university, get this straight and right in your head. The teachers, lecturers, students, everybody. You are not here to just gain some more knowledge. That is just to satisfy your parents. But you have a divine parent to whom you have to satisfy. And that divine parent demands that you realize your true self. And again I'm repeating, don't assume, don't watch these unwanted videos in cinemas where they show realization happens and when big bomb blasts on top of your head and some big sparklers come out and nothing like that happens. In fact, I was telling the other day in Tripura Rahasya, somebody gave me the book, so out of casual reading, I was reading the book. So I was reading what this Tripura Rahasya is. There is one king by name Hema Chuda. I was telling the other day, I will tell the story. It's a short story. This fellow got infatuated with one girl in the forest, Hemaleka, who was being taken care of by a sage by name Vyagrapada, who was a jnani. She was born to a damsel, a celestial damsel and a king's union. But she was left in the care of this sage and mother left for the heavens. She grew in the company of Vyagrapada, so she also became a jnani. But behaved like, jnanis what they do, cut wood and draw water. So that's what she was doing in the forest. And so this Hemal Chuda lost his way while hunting, and like any other story, he found his way to the ashram in the midst of a storm. So she made him sit, gave him hospitality, fruit, water, juice, whatever. And after that, he got so infatuated, he wanted to marry her. So she said, she knew Jnana, she's a Jnani, she knew what he's up to, but she also knew there is a bigger plan of God. So when I said get married, there is a reason, bigger plan of God. So Vyagrapada came, by his yoga dhyana, he understood this is going to lead to a great transformation in the kingdom. So he permitted the marriage. So Hemachuda brought this girl back on his horse. Father was very happy, beautiful girl, very intelligent, no problem. And that too, grown up in a Rishi's Sannidhi, Vyagrapada's Sannidhi. What else we require? A great daughter-in-law, and he got them married with the great pomp and show. But what happened soon after marriage, this Hemachuda realized that this Hemaleka is not interested in anything. She doesn't enjoy the comforts of the palace. She doesn't show any great interest in food and luxuries, nor is she has any interest in him. So he tries to please her in so many ways by bringing more attractions, showing more affection and love. But she's always as if not at all there in that place, though she is there. So after some time, this Hemchuda gets frustrated with her, says that I am trying to entertain you and make you happy. You seem like you have no affection for me, you have no liking for all that I do for you. So he got frustrated. Then she said, I am not angry with you, or I am not that I don't like all these things. I am just thinking, is this all the joy is all about? These pleasures of the world, these pleasures of marriage, is that all that joy is? That is all I am questioning. Is it what we need in this place? He said, of course, an insect knows what is a joy and what is not a joy. What kind of lady, you are grown up in Rishi's place, you don't know this much what is the joy of life. You're not even enjoying your life. She was a Jnani, she was checking about what a big fool he is, whom I married. So anyway, she started arguing with her. Arguing with, she started telling, if this is the joy, then why does it end after a certain time? Why it is not continuing forever? Even insects and animals crave for these kind of joys. Are we better than insects and animals? Then she gives a whole discourse on how dirty this body is, full of feces and urine and all kinds of things, and you are after this body and its pleasures. How better are we than an insect in the excreta, who is also craving for the same joys? This man is stunned by her talk. So what he does, he is shocked. He says, this lady is something. And he leaves the place and starts thinking about this, vichara, because of her hard talk. And he thinks and thinks and thinks. He realizes, yes, what nonsense. Why should I run behind these temporary pleasures? But what else should I do, he asks then. That's all I know. So by force of habit, even if he tries to restrain himself, he cannot. So he comes back to her saying, you have made my life miserable. I was earlier happier. Now you told me all these things and made me guilty of whatever I do. Whatever I eat, I think twice. Whatever I do, I think twice. Because you made me feel guilty. Most of us go through this stage, isn't it? For ignorance is bliss, we are enjoying everything. Suddenly Swami says, this is right, that is wrong. And then the guilt inside, oh God, this is wrong, it seems. What should I do now? But force of habit, Purvajanma samskaras, vasanas, they drive us. And then we break our head and say, ayyo, again. Swami, what is this? So he came back to his wife, saying that you have really stirred my being. I was peaceful and you made me lose all the peace. Now tell me more. How to get rid of this? How to overcome this? And then she goes on saying that all the objects that we see, we think gives pleasure, it's all in our imagination. And she gives a story of how a woman who was married to a prince never liked the prince. So what she would do, she would give him some intoxicant and put another woman in his chamber. And she would disappear with another man. And this, in his intoxication, he'll think that he's with his wife. Till one day they forgot to give him the intoxicant and he realized that he's not with his wife. Then he realized. So she said, this man all the time in his imagination was with his wife and thought he is with his wife. And he was enjoying everything. Only when the realization that this is not his wife, that is when he got to know that he's not the right person. But all this while, who enjoyed then? In his imagination, he was with his wife only. So that is the way she explains that all our pleasures are imaginary. What gives pleasures to one gives sorrow to another. Fire is pleasurable in cold. It's terrible in heat. So objects by themselves don't give pleasure or pain. It's our interaction with them and our imagination. So she explains and he understands. Good man. He will finally realize that, yes, I think something is wrong. And then she goes, I will not go to long story, she tells her about all our scriptures are parables. Nobody speaks straight. These people speak in parables. So that story I will tell another day. Anyway, the end result is what? He realizes that he has to do something about it. Yes, all our thought of the world and the ideas of joy and sorrow are all imaginary, he understands. And he tells, you go and meditate on this idea. And he meditates. Good disciple, Shraddhavan. And as he meditates, he falls into a state of great peace. He sees tremendous light. Now I'm coming to the main point. What will happen if I get moksha, realization? He sees big white light. He enjoys. And then he again opens his eyes, again goes back. Again, this time he sees pitch darkness, but nevertheless peace. Third time he tries, he sleeps off like most of us do. Sleeps off. Then he wakes up and says, what am I experiencing? Is this samadhi or is it something else? Once I see light, once I see darkness, once I sleep off and see dreams. What is going on? And he calls for his wife who comes and explains to him that, see, neither the light is true, nor the darkness is true, nor these dreams are true. But there is a time in between the light and darkness and dreams, that time is samadhi, she says. Between the breath that goes out and the breath that comes in, there is a gap. That is samadhi. Focus on that, she says. Between two interactions, I see this as a podium. Now, the moment I shift to see as a cooler, between seeing it as a podium and seeing this as a cooler, there is a shifting time. That time is samadhi, she says. You dilate that. She explains to him. Then he says, oh, that's a wonderful idea. I never thought. Between two perceptions, there is a gap. That is what called vyana. Between prana and apana, there is a vyana. That is concentration. Think of it. When you are doing something very seriously, you don't breathe at all. Do you breathe? When you're eating, do you breathe? When you're speaking, do you breathe? You don't breathe for that moment. Because your whole mind is involved in that activity. So that time the mind is most concentrated, shifted to the divine contemplation. It will attain divinity. So she explains, and this man goes back into contemplation of that. And at this time he really focuses and enjoys that moment of no thoughts. Absolute peace and samadhi. He understands that he is more than these thoughts. And then after 1.5 hours or so he comes out. This time he has not seen light, not seen darkness, not even fallen asleep. He was aware, awake, at the same time he was in a state which was beyond all the states of existence. So he comes back and says, now I have no interest in running the kingdom, I have no interest in you, I have no interest in anything. In fact, he gives a lecture to her. How can you know all these things and still you live like an ordinary woman? Look at his foolishness. You should be always in the state of samadhi. Go back and meditate. And leave me, I want to go back into this state. He starts going, she catches his hand and tells, what kind of samadhi is this? It depends on an eyelid which opens and closes. What is that samadhi, she says. It should be irrespective of what you do physically. Your mind should be absorbed in that self. That is true samadhi, she explains. Look at her way she explains, starting with dispassion for the worldly things to vichara, and slowly grows into the state of contemplation. And from contemplation, she says, it's not just about closed-eyed contemplation. Open, wide-eyed also you should be contemplating. That is the ultimate stage, she explains and teaches. Hemchuda becomes a Jivan Mukta, not just a Jnani, he becomes a Jivan Mukta. Means as he lives and does his duties, he is always aware of who he is. He wins many wars, runs his kingdom very well. Seeing that his father, Mukta Chuda, he comes and says, what is happening to my son? Something is different about him. He seems to be intoxicated. He keeps doing everything very efficiently, but he is not at all involved in anything. Seems like there are two things operating. So he comes and learns this jnana, his brother and father. Then Hemachuda explains to them, they become Jivan Muktas. Seeing them, the ministers get inquisitive. They come and ask. Ministers learn, they become Jivan Muktas. From there, the ordinary men, business people, the cleaners, everybody becomes a Jivan Mukta. The whole place becomes full of Jivan Muktas. A parrot also chants Advaitic verses. That kind of thing. Businessmen are doing their business. Cleaners are doing their cleaning. Pandits are doing their pujas. Kings are running the kingdom. Everybody is doing their duty, yet everybody is a Jivan Mukta. And that Nagari becomes Vidya Nagari, they say. Everybody is a Jnani and a Jivan Mukta. How did it happen? Because one Jnani entered that kingdom. One Hemaleka entered that kingdom and she transformed the whole kingdom. Imagine if Swami's one student with this kind of an understanding enters one town. What can he do to that town? I'm not saying very next day it will be done. But with consistent, persistent effort, what he can do? Same thing he can do what Adi Shankaracharya did to his 4 disciples. Isn't it? So why I told this story is that the need of the hours is not engineers, not doctors. The need of the hour is Jnanis, Jivan Muktas, who can go and preach this to all others and pull them out of this ignorance, like Hemaleka pulled her husband Hemachuda out of the ignorance. And made him realize, and through him he made everybody else realize. So when you put effort on this path, nothing gets wasted. That's why I say, Neha Bikrama Nashvasti, Pratyavayo na Vidyate. Any effort is never destroyed. No adverse effects come to you. You may think, oh, will I develop dispassion for my wife and children? Will I run away? No, you will not do that if you are a true Jnani. If you are these pseudo-Jnanis who think they are Jnanis, then you may do all these kinds of funny and fanciful things. But if you are a true Jnani, you will stay where you are. Cut wood and draw water. You will not, in fact, do it with more interest and enthusiasm than ever before. That kind of attitude you will develop. And that attitude alone is liberation. There is moha kshaya is moksha. There is no other definition. Mukti is as and now. It's not to be attained after some death or after some certain event of, as I said, your head bursts open and something comes out, kundalini, and then you see all stars and planets, and that is not Jivan Mukti. There are some bouts of samadhi, some bouts of bliss, but they are like going up like a rocket and coming down the next moment. They're only for a short span, they shine in the sky and disappear. But this state of all constant integrated awareness, what we call, that is the state of a Jivan Mukta. He is always aware what he is doing. He may behave, and for a moment you will think that he has forgotten that he is a Jivan Mukta. But deep down back of his head, that is going on. Like this clock that is going on ticking, though we don't watch it. It is doing its duty. Time is moving. Like that, unwatched, it goes on inside. And sometimes it gets into some kind of a very thick action. They can simply withdraw their senses and mind like the tortoise withdraws itself into the shell and go back to that state. See how easy it is. Every time you have a trouble, just withdraw. The whole world will disappear. Problems will disappear. Your attachments will disappear. Ego will disappear. All your issues will disappear. Go back. And then come back when the danger is over. Close the door of all the senses. Close the door of the mind and say, I don't want to entertain anything. I want to be with myself. Lock yourself down. Inside. And then come back. This is how if you operate, you can really balance that is samadhi. Samadhi. Buddhi is always steady. Never fluctuating. This is Advaita. This is the philosophy of India. Now tell me, which country, which religion, which culture has ever thought of spirituality as practically as Vedantins have done? You can challenge all the cultures, philosophies, dogmas, whatever has been there. Not one culture can withstand. It's like the stars that disappear when sun rises. All that will disappear when Vedanta rises. That is the power of Vedanta. Only in the dark these stars shimmer. Bright sun comes, they become pale, invisible. That is the power of Vedanta's sun. Thousands of suns shining in a Vedantic man, a being. So idea is that this Mala Vikshep avarana has to be removed, then only the sun will be seen. For that all these efforts, satsangas, seva karyakramas, all this is for that, bhakti for that. But at the same time, this vichara should go on. See, all three are not different. They all will help you to develop into the other. From a bhakti, you can be a good karma yogi will be a good bhakti yogi, a bhakti karma yogi will be a good jnana yogi, jnana yogi will be a better karma yogi. It's not different. They're like three legs of the same stool. Each support the other. So you have to understand this, and I want this to be so clear, like the Astamalaka to our students and staff and everybody else who is involved. This Muddanahalli should become Vidyanagari. Everybody walking, talking is a jnani, is a Jivan Mukta. They do everything, but at the same time they are not the doers. That firm conviction, that establishment in that idea is the whole effort. It may not happen in a day. I'm not even worrying about it. May not even happen in our lifetimes. I'm not even worried about it. But definitely you want to leave behind a legacy. 1,000 years from now, also, the whole world should be reverberating with this idea of Vedanta, where everybody is a Vedantin, everybody is a Jivan Mukta, everybody is a living liberated man, not dead liberation. Living, they are liberated. But if they put this effort, only then. Without effort, nothing is possible. How much of a sun shines, you don't open the window, nothing is going to happen. You wash your clothes, you bring it, you don't put it in the sun, it won't dry. So you do everything and finally don't think of Vedanta, it won't dry. Your bhakti, jnana, your karma will not be efficient. At the end, it all has to come to jnana. Even bhakti yoga should lead to jnana yoga. That's what I explained the other day. Bhakti ultimately will lead to jnana. Duality will lead to non-duality only at the end. It should. If it's stopping at duality, it has not achieved its purpose, true purpose. You have not chewed the sugar cane properly. Still there is some rasa left and you threw it. So till that jnana comes, the work does not end for anybody. Now I have you would have observed more and more and more the discourses, the talks are going in this direction. It's no more those just entertainment. It's serious business of Vedanta. Why I repeat and repeat, and why I'm using this Shankara Jayanti as the opportunity to explain it in so many words, because that is what he was born for. That is what his life's mission was. And thanks to him and his people that today we are able to talk about it. Otherwise, I would have been sitting by side of somebody who would keep a gun on my head if I speak about Vedanta. Our nation could have been that too. Or by mention of this Vedanta or Hinduism, our heads would have been rolling. It could have been that time too. But for these people and their tremendous effort and sacrifices, that India is what India is today. And we live together in harmony, and we still think of these higher truths of life, despite all the chaos that exists around and inside. This is to the credit of Vivekananda and his co-brothers, co-disciples of Ramakrishna, disciple brothers, who took to this path, gave up everything. They said, we don't want to put our legs into this crocodile's mouth. It's not for us. Then walked away. They perform their own Antyeshti before they become sannyasis, symbolically. But they perform their final rites and go. Because your Purva ashrama is over. It's done with. They change their names, they shave their head, they don a different clothing, their habits change, and they live away from their families. But I am not like that. I am not saying you should shave your head and don different clothes and go. Guddamulu, gunamulu. Not the clothes, but the gunas inside should change. That is sannyasa for us. Stay as you are, wear the best of the saris. I always want women to be wearing good saris. You ask them, the maximum I spend my pocket money, whatever I get from devotees, is on saris. Because I want women to look like that. Devis, they are Devis. Devis should look like Devis. I would like to see Devis wearing tatters. No, I would like to see, if I think they are Durga, Lakshmi, they should look like one. So I am always happy when women are dressed well, when they are not wearing jewelry, they are not wearing bangles, they are not wearing bindi, they are not wearing... I don't like it. Because I would like to see them as the very mother goddesses. They should also maintain the dignity. Swami thinks we are divine goddesses. We must look like one at least. Begin there. Pretend, tend, end. Somewhere. At the same time, when I look at men, I look at them as the Parabrahman himself. I look at you as Parameshwari, I look at them as Paramashiva. I look at them as people who are walking, talking divine beings. They don't know, that's all it is. Once they know, it's like you have 100 rupees in your pocket and you forgot you have kept in the pocket. Suddenly you go to market and realize I don't have money. You purchase something from the shop and you realize I don't have money. And by chance, you are getting all tensed. The shopkeeper is looking at you. You came to cheat me, you came to fool me. And suddenly, by chance, you put your hand in the pocket and you find that 100 rupees. 100 rupees did not appear on its own at the time of crisis. It was always there. What happened? You forgot that it is in your pocket. That's all. Look at the relief that you get. Abba, 100 rupees here. Don't you get that relief? How did the relief come? Was the relief not there in you before? It was there. The relief in your pocket of 100 rupees was there even before you went to the shop. It was there when you were purchasing goods. It was also there when you were getting tensed about how to pay this man. But only when you realized it is there in your pocket, it actually became a relief. It was realized that it was in your pocket. That's all is Atman. It's there. We don't realize we struggle with the world. We go through the ups and downs, sorrow and pains and joys and sufferings, gains, pleasures, excitements, depressions. Till we put the hand in our pocket and say, here this 100 rupees is, I had forgotten it is there with me. We pay off this world saying, done with you and your karmas, free me. No more transactions with you. That's all is this Atman. It's there, we don't know. The day we put our hands and know it, we are relieved of all the sufferings. See how simple. Means we cannot further simplify it. It's like you have broken down into the lowest possible, because for that time it was there. Then it went one level simpler, it went in Vivekananda's times. Now it is going even lower, simpler level. Beyond that it cannot go simpler. It's Swami's discourses. It is coming to even simpler level of realization. Beyond that you cannot do anything. If after this also you don't realize, then our Tripura Rahasya Dattatreya says, There cannot be a greater unfortunate fool. He is telling to Parshurama, see, I have explained to you everything in very simple way. You have asked too many questions. I have told you too many times the same thing. And if anybody hears all these things so many times, and after that also they don't realize, there cannot be a greater unfortunate fool than him. So that is what we have to be. Grateful, not great fools. That we have got this knowledge. It's like a gooseberry in our palm. Let us think about it. In our day-to-day life, let us spend it an hour or two, morning or evening or afternoon, wherever. Any time you find, 10 minutes you find, withdraw. 10 minutes you find, instead of looking into your phones and checking your updates and emails, just withdraw. The 10 minutes after lunch and before you go to the office, withdraw. The 10 minutes before you come for bhajans and sit here, withdraw. 10 minutes after the bhajan, withdraw. Keep practicing it every 10 minutes, somewhere or the other you will find. Go for a walk, withdraw. Anything. You had your food, 10 minutes time you have before you undertake next activity, withdraw. Keep practicing things, withdrawal. And you'll realize that time will come when you'll be always in the state of withdrawn, yet you will be active. You'll become a witness to yourself. That is the day you have become Jivan Mukti. No cracker show will happen, no lights, no sounds, nothing. A simple, pleasant silence. A deep felt satisfaction. That's all is Samadhi. All these picturizations, all these things are all bouts of ecstasy which come and go. So these bouts of ecstasies don't run behind them. This Hatha Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, I never promoted them. People ask me for Pajas mantra. I never give any mantras to anybody. If anybody asks mantra, you say, I am divine, you think of it, that is enough. It is not my way. My way is simple. Do selfless service outside, develop bhakti in your heart, and meditate on the truth. Your body should be engaged in continuous selfless work. Your heart should be full of love for God. And your mind should be contemplating on this truth of what is real and what is unreal. These three, if you engage, Chitta will become Shuddha. Because on Chitta, all these things are only lying. Mala, Vikshepa, Varna, these impurities of body, mind. They will go, Chitta will reveal to you the divine self. So that is why I lead worthy disciples who will understand this. And understand and practice this. And through their life, they preach it to 10 others. There is no other way to save this world. This is the only way. And if we as a group don't rise to the occasion and do what our Guru wants from us, and we fall short in our loyalty and commitment to our Guru, we are the biggest unfortunate fools on earth. Because never God has become a Guru to so many. These Gurus taught 4, 5, 10 people, that's about it. Never a God has taken a mass teaching like this and taking it to all corners of the world, translating into their languages and teaching them. Never it has happened before. So this effort should find its fulfillment, find its ultimate culmination in the whole world transforming to Vedantins, Sanatana Dharma. That's the only refuge. And who will take this to the world? You all. Each one of you, in your own way, will take this to the world. So unless you are clear, and clarity will come from experience, not from accumulation of knowledge. Experience will give you clarity. The experience is what you should crave for. Simple thing, repeating again, selfless service in the hands, devotion for love for God in the heart, and head should always contemplate on the truth. Mind should always be engaged in contemplating, that is real, this is not real. Anytime an emotion overpowers you, withdraw. And tell that is not real. These are waves on the ocean, I am the ocean. These waves should not, who moves whom? Ocean moves the wave or moves with the ocean? Dog wags the tail or tail wags the dog? It should not, because your senses should not pull you around. Don't give yourself into your mind and senses. You should be able to keep them in your control. That will come with practice alone, nothing else. Abhyasa yoga. Keep practicing this. Every act selfless, every thought full of love for God. God in everyone. Sarva Jiva Namaskar. And every thought, Smaranitya Manityatam. All the time. Any emotion negative, this is not me. This is not according to my divine self. This is mind. I shall discard it. purity, compassion, kindness, this is the reflection of my true self. Accept it. Like Hamsa. That's why they call Paramahamsa. Ramakrishna, Paramahamsa is called. What is Paramahamsa? Hamsa, they say, can separate water from milk. It can drink the milk and leave the water. Look at the subtleness of this thing. Paramahamsa is what? He can remove the world from, Maya from Jnana, and he can accept the Jnana and leave the Maya behind. That is Paramahamsa. So that is the idea of us living. And let us not waste these Jayantis by simply glorifying them without practicing what they said. That is not the way it should be. The true tribute to these great yogis, masters, and gurus is that we take their message to our heart and practice it in our daily lives. For me, there is no tomorrow. From today, when you go back, withdraw for 5 minutes and see. Every time you get an opportunity, withdraw. Any time when you are with yourself, when you don't have to interact with all of them, practice withdrawing. Then even when you are acting and interacting, you will be always in that state of withdrawal. It will become natural state of that is called Sahaja Samadhi. Not Nirvilkalpa, not Savikalpa, with your want or without your want, no. Natural state of your existence is Samadhi. Always equanimous, always aware. At that you reach, till then the journey does not end. And for different people it will come at different times. But one thing I can assure you is that if you put efforts, Swami's grace is in abundance. He wants more and more jnanis. So, when you want more people to pass, you bring down the toughness of the question paper. You give some grace marks and say, pass, 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 everybody pass. So even if you put a little effort at this time, this is such an opportunity, poignant time in the history of mankind, where God wants to pass you. So if you put little effort, He'll give grace marks and He'll pass. You are a jnani, go, spread it. That opportunity we should not lose. When your marks are being given freely, you should not throw it away like this, isn't it? So this is the best time, best placed, best way to do it. Don't lose it.
स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते सम्प्राप्ते सन्निहिते काले सम्प्राप्ते सन्निहिते काले नहि रक्षति दुःकृङ्करणे नहि रक्षति दुःकृङ्करणे भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते मूढजहि धनागम कृष्णा गुरु सद्बुद्धिं मनसि वितृष्णा यल्लभसे निज कर्मोपातं यल्लभसे निज कर्मोपातं वित्तं तेन विनोदय चित्तं वित्तं तेन विनोदय चित्तं भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते पृच्छति गिरे वार्तां कोऽपि न पृच्छति गिरे भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मुरारे मा कुरु धनजन यौवनगर्वं हरति निमेषा काल सर्वं मा कुरु धनजन यौवनगर्वं हरति निमेषा काल सर्वं मायामयमिदम् अखिलं विद्वा मायामयमिदम् अखिलं विद्वा ब्रह्मपदं त्वं प्रविश विदित्वा ब्रह्मपदं त्वं प्रविश विदित्वा भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते सुरमन्दिरकरो मूलनिवासः शय्याभूतलम् अजिनं वासः सुरमन्दिरकरो मूलनिवासः शय्याभूतलम् अजिनं वासः सर्वपरिग्रह भोगत्याग सर्वपरिग्रह भोगत्याग कस्य सुखं न करोति विरागः कस्य सुखं न करोति विरागः भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते भगवद्गीता किञ्चिदधीता गङ्गाजललव कणिका पीता भगवद्गीता किञ्चिदधीता गङ्गाजललव कणिका पीता सकृदपियेन मुरारि समचा सकृदपियेन मुरारि समचा प्रियते तस्य यमेन न चर्चा प्रियते तस्य यमेन न चर्चा भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मुरारे पुनरपि जननं पुनरपि मरणं पुनरपि जननी जठरे शयनम् इह संसारे बहुदुस्तारे इह संसारे बहुदुस्तारे कृपया पारे पाहि मुरारे कृपया पारे पाहि मुरारे भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते गुरुचरणाम्बुज निर्भरभक्तः संसारादचिराद्भवमुक्तः गुरुचरणाम्बुज निर्भरभक्तः द्रक्ष्यसि निज हृदयस्थं देवं द्रक्ष्यसि निज हृदयस्थं देवं भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते सम्प्राप्ते सन्निहिते काले सम्प्राप्ते सन्निहिते काले नहि नहि रक्षति दुर्गं करणे नहि नहि रक्षति दुर्गं करणे भज गोविन्द